Hey dog, the tariffs are causing some chaos in terms of
They are.
forecasting.
Yep.
So yeah.
An analyst firm is predicting that this is still going to be the fastest selling console ever,
Yep.
but they're also saying it's lowered because of tariff pricing concerns.
Yeah.
They have said that with tariff and uncertain pricing, Nintendo may choose to scale back its manufacturing. If prices increases substantially due to tariffs, a significant portion of the buyers are still likely to hold back on purchases until price comes down. The situation is changing and will be closely monitored as DFC regularly updates its forecast throughout the year.
Yep.
So
the gist of this story, I feel, is basically that the 17 million sales number is so high that even with an expected reduction of 2 million in sales, it still would be the fastest selling console ever. And they still think that's going to happen.
Yes, especially because it'd be 15 million units over the course of 6 months, which is fucking crazy. Because if you look at Switch 1 sales, which at its current pace is looking like it's going to be the best selling console ever. If not, it's going to be damn close. Its best year was like 27 million, which was COVID. Was 2021, the year after COVID.
Yep.
And then the other best years were 2022 and 2020, which also makes sense because of COVID, Pokemon, and a bunch of other factors. So like hitting, over half of the high mark in 6 months seems like a very, very fucking optimistic fantasy number.
Yeah, I do think they're may be a little overzealous about how high they think these numbers are going to get.
Yeah. There's reason for optimism in simply releasing a new, better Switch with the brand new Mario Kart, but and then here's the variable is at the time of Switch 2's release, there could be a whole lot of like, are the tariffs going up or not? Because if they are, now is the time to get it at $450 or whatever.
Yeah.
And I know they're moving. They're probably moving a lot of Switch 2 units to different countries to try and avoid anything big. But who knows, man?
Well, the tariffs on the countries that Switch 2 is primarily manufactured in, that being Cambodia and Vietnam, have been put on pause for 90 days.
That's right. All tariffs have except for China.
Yeah, and 90 days is long enough to reach the Switch 2 launch window.
Right.
So
the launch window, yeah.
Yeah, so they don't have to worry about getting consoles in for a solid launch, which may or may not result in going, you know what, let's just ship everything we possibly can over to the States as fast as we can, and then just sell out of stock slowly. And I see that as a reasonable occurrence, that we might not get hit by a price increase, maybe a 10%, which is still not insubstantial. It's a 10% increase is still $45, and so it makes it almost $500. But it's I don't think it's gonna sell 15 million still. I think that I think that the situation is just not in its favor, and that the economic uncertainty, it's not only going to lead to consumer uncertainty in their purchases for price increase, but also just general consumer uncertainty in purchases because of economic turmoil caused by the current economic difficulties that people are going through as a consequence of the market crash.
So I think that, like, looking back at the last major recession we had, 08, video games did exceptionally well in spite of all that, because people were like buying games instead of like going on vacation and doing shit like that.
Right.
So I could see a like win for them if history repeats itself in that sense of, oh, I can't afford to go on vacation or do a lot of shit, so I'm gonna go double down, buy a Switch 2 and just play video games at home. Like I think that is a possibility,
I believe
but
2008 had different enough market conditions that I find it unlikely that video games would be successful in the same manner they were during an economic crash during the previous one, largely because video games have grown so much that, as of right now, they're the largest form of media. They're
they were back then.
one.
Like they beat movies and music back then.
Really? I didn't know that they had done it that early. But regardless, I believe that they've started to approach their effective consumer market cap in that they're reaching the audiences that will play video games. You're not going to get a Wii that breaks out amongst people that don't play games and introduces a huge number of people into the industry like you did back during that era in today's market, because I think so many more people play games. It's so much more ubiquitous, and that people who have been lifelong gamers have aged up to a point where there are very few new markets to capture for gamers. Whereas during 2008, you had things like you had games getting introduced into colleges and getting way more popular there, and the older generation getting to a point where they had a lot larger of a degree of consumer spending available amongst the market that was interested in video games as they aged up from children into people in the 18 to 35 range where they're way more productive, and they were the ones who weren't able to go on vacation and purchasing an Xbox or a PlayStation because they had the income necessary to purchase a video game console, but not to go on vacation because of the economic crash. Whereas a child requires the buy-in of their parents, and they're just generally a worse consumer on the whole. So I think video games don't have that advantage going into this potential economic recession that they had back in the day.
I don't think they have the growth advantage of expanding into new markets like the Wii did, and kind of like, but I still think that you have but now that you have adults who are more familiar with video games, who are more willing to like understand the value of a $450 Switch and being like, oh yeah, I'll totally get my kid a Switch because I know they're going to get 8 years of Mario Kart and Zelda and other games I know are good for my kid. Like I think that is a big, so I think that, entertainment does real well during bad economic times. Really well. Not like expensive entertainment. And I think that, well, $450 is not an inconsequential amount of money. That's a lot of money.
Right.
But I think that for something that most people will get 6 to 9, 10 years out of, I think most people see that as a worthwhile investment. I think $80 games or $80 game, like there's only one that's like a new game, is a harder sell. I think that's a significantly harder sell. But I also think that, like, I'm not expecting like market growth, but I am still expecting it to do well. I think these analysts are out of their fucking mind, though. I think they're at like fucking 15 million in 6 months, bro. I want someone to bookmark this so we can take a look back at it at the end of the year.
I would like that because I have no idea. I think it's going to sell well. What the number's going to be, I have no idea. What are people doing out there?
Like I think it'll do a lot better than like Switch 1 or PS2's first year.
Sure.
Like, to be fair, PS2's first year was only like 3 months in the market, but still. So yeah, I don't know. I think that, I want to do that, and at the end of the year, I'm sure we'll look into console sales. So it's like,
it'll be interesting to look at. I just don't think it'll be. I don't think it's as interesting as, again, like the idea of markets going crazy and then trying to push $80 to $90 games throughout the industry. I think that's the much more interesting thing to look at than this. But that's just me.
Oh, yeah.
I am
agree.
suspicious. I am suspicious of analyst firms like this. I always have been. I think they're incredibly vulnerable to hype. And that if you go around and you follow a bunch of analyst firms and always follow their advice, you're still not going to outperform the market. They're not actually accurate to an extent that is like so much better than the consumer public about the performance of companies.
If you want the most accurate performance of a company, you just follow Nancy Pelosi stock. That's what you do.
40%. She's the goat.
God damn it.
It's true though, dude. It's totally true.
How much stock? How much Nintendo stock does Nancy Pelosi have?
I'm sure we could find out.
Yeah,
sure.
we don't need to do this right now. We got a podcast to do, but that's something for you, the viewer, can do at home. Leave a comment what you find. Oh my god. All right.
Yeah. But the next story
is